Buildings don't just stand still. They remember. They hold history in stone, steel, and silence. The Colosseum echoes with crowds long gone. Hagia Sophia carries layers of faith. The Taj Mahal whispers of love that endures. But buildings also look forward. They transform, they rise, they crumble, they connect us to each other and to nature. They reflect control, resistance, hope, and survival. What do buildings dream about? The same things we do: forgiveness, resilience, belonging, and love. Through them we dream, and through us, they dream too. Imagine walking into an old building, the kind that has stood for hundreds or even thousands of years. The walls may be cracked, the stones worn, the arches incomplete. Yet in the silence of those places, something remains alive. Buildings, even when they no longer serve their original purpose, hold on to memory. They are not simply piles of stone or brick. They are vessels. They carry echoes of the people who built them, the lives lived inside them, and the cultures that shaped their forms. When we think about what it means for a building to dream, we can start here, with memory. Memory is the dream that never stops repeating, a trace that outlasts the flesh of those who once walked through the doors. The Colosseum in Rome is one of the clearest examples of this. Built in the 1st century, it was designed for entertainment. Crowds of 50,000 once poured through its gates. They came to watch gladiators fight, animals hunt, and spectacles unfold. Today the arena is a ruin. Its marble seats are gone, its underground chambers are exposed to the sun. Tourists walk through, pausing to take photos, their footsteps soft compared to the thunder of the crowds long ago. If the Colosseum dreams, its dreams may not be of triumph. They may be of forgiveness. The walls still carry the weight of cruelty. You can picture the roar of the crowd as a man fought to the death. You can sense the silence of those who had no choice but to enter the arena. A dream of forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about asking to be remembered differently. Instead of blood, perhaps music. Instead of screams, laughter. In fact, in recent years, concerts and public gatherings have been held there. People gather not to celebrate violence, but to enjoy art and community. In that sense, the Colosseum's dream may be coming true. It wants to shift from a monument to pain into a place of togetherness. It cannot erase its past, but it can hold a different kind of crowd in its stone arms. If we move eastward, another building tells us a different kind of dream. Hagia Sophia in Istanbul has lived many lives. Built in the 6th century, it was first a church, designed to display the power of the Byzantine Empire. Its dome was so vast that people at the time believed it must be held up by divine forces. For centuries it was the largest enclosed space in the world. Later it became a mosque after the Ottoman conquest. Then in the 20th century, it was turned into a museum. More recently, it was converted again into a mosque. Each layer left its mark. Mosaics of Christian saints survive under plaster. Minarets rise beside the dome. Tourists from every part of the world visit to witness this complex story. If Hagia Sophia dreams, it may dream of unity. It does not belong fully to one faith or another. It has carried prayers in Greek, Arabic, and Turkish. Its walls have seen priests, imams, emperors, and politicians. The building itself seems to ache for a way to hold all these identities at once. Imagine the dome as a bowl catching every word ever spoken there, sacred or ordinary. The dream of unity is not about being neutral. It is about being a space where difference does not fracture, but coexists. A visitor walking through Hagia Sophia today can feel that weight, the tension between division and togetherness. The dream, then, is that the building can reconcile what people have not yet managed to reconcile fully. The Taj Mahal in Agra tells yet another story. Built in the 17th century, it was made as a tomb for the wife of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. Its white marble shimmers at sunrise and sunset. The inlaid stones glow with shifting colors. For many it is a symbol of love, but like all buildings, it carries its own risks. Pollution darkens its surface. The river nearby recedes. Millions of tourists crowd its courtyards each year. If the Taj Mahal dreams, it may dream of eternal love, but also of survival. It was never meant to be a postcard. It was a declaration of grief, a way of saying love outlasts life. That message still stands, but the building itself faces decay. Preservation work continues. Scaffolding sometimes covers its minarets. Workers clean the marble with a paste made from mud, a simple method that restores its pale glow. Imagine the Taj Mahal as a voice whispering, "Let me keep shining. Let me remain a place where grief and beauty can exist together. Visitors who come searching for romance may not see this layer, but the building holds it. Its dream is to keep that promise that love carved in stone will endure, even if stone itself is fragile. These three buildings are different in age, purpose and style, yet they share a single role. They carry memory. The Colosseum remembers cruelty and asks for forgiveness. Hagia Sophia remembers division and longs for unity. The Taj Mahal remembers love and longs for survival. Together they show us how memory can be both heavy and hopeful. A ruin is not silent. It speaks of what once was. A sacred space tells us that identity is never fixed. A monument of love tells us that grief can be turned into art. When we imagine buildings dreaming, we are not giving them human qualities for fun. We are recognizing that they hold the stories we leave behind. They remind us of our failures, our devotion, and our longing to be remembered. Think about what happens when you stand in one of these places. At the Colosseum you might hear the echo of your own footsteps and imagine the sound of crowds from 2,000 years ago. At Hagia Sophia, you might look up at the dome and see both mosaics and calligraphy, and feel the press of histories meeting overhead. At the Taj Mahal, you might step closer to the marble and notice the fine carvings, each petal of stone shaped by hand centuries ago. In those moments, the dream of the building reaches you. It is not a dream told in words, but in space, in form, in silence, and in detail. Buildings outlast us, but they also depend on us. Without care, they fall. Without people, their memory fades. Yet with each generation new visitors come, new caretakers repair, new stories attach. This is how the dream of memory continues. It is not fixed, but it does not disappear. When we think about architecture, we often picture something new rising from the ground. Fresh steel, clean glass, sharp lines, a sense of novelty. Yet most of our cities are already full of buildings, many of them standing half-used or falling into neglect. For much of the modern era, the idea of progress meant clearing away the old to make space for the new. This tabula rasa approach, the clean slate, has shaped skylines across the world. But now, as the climate crisis deepens and resources grow scarcer, architects and communities are beginning to look again at what is already here. The dream of transformation and adaptive reuse is one where buildings do not end with abandonment. They live again by taking on new roles, sometimes very different from what they were first built to do. In this way, architecture stops being only about invention and becomes also about memory, imagination, and responsibility. One of the most striking examples of this shift is the Électricité du Liban headquarters in Beirut. Built in the 1970s by architect Pierre Nimmer, the building is a heavy concrete block, a clear example of brutalist design. Its purpose was technical and bureaucratic, to manage electricity distribution in Lebanon. During the country's long civil war, the building was damaged and partly abandoned, but it remained a landmark in the skyline. Today, many see it not as a dead piece of infrastructure, but as a potential hub for new forms of life. Imagine its large, open interior stripped of its desks and wires, filled instead with studios, performance spaces, classrooms, and workshops. The same thick walls that once held the hum of generators could now carry music, art, and human voices. The dream of this building is to turn from a source of industrial power to a source of cultural energy. People in Beirut have even spoken of using it as a public commons, a place where creativity and community meet under the shelter of concrete. By keeping its shell and reimagining its purpose, the city would honor its history while writing a new chapter. In Saudi Arabia, the story takes a different form. Dhafran International Airport was designed by Minoru Yamasaki, the architect better known for New York's original World Trade Center. Built in 1961, the airport was once a proud modernist gateway to the kingdom, but as air traffic expanded, newer airports took its place, and the building lost its role. Rather than leaving it to decay, architects have suggested turning the site into something more rooted in the land itself, an ecological center. The vast halls, which once held travelers rushing to departures and arrivals, could hold greenhouses and research labs for native plants. The runways could be reclaimed for solar farms or desert gardens. Where the airport once symbolized speed and mobility, it could now symbolize care and sustainability. Imagine a visitor walking through what used to be a terminal, and instead finding trees, irrigation systems, and classrooms where students learn about desert ecology. The dream here is to transform a machine for transit into a space for renewal. In doing so, the airport continues to serve the public, not by moving bodies across borders, but by nurturing a different kind of journey, one into the future of sustainable living. The dream of reuse is perhaps clearest in places where abandonment is most visible. Detroit is filled with the skeletons of factories, silent monuments to the automotive industry that once made the city boom. These plants and warehouses once produced the machines that reshaped the 20th century. Now many of them sit empty, windows shattered, weeds breaking through concrete floors. Yet even in this state, they hold possibility. Artists have moved into some of them, using the vast open spaces for installations. Community groups have imagined them as centers for urban farming, where hydroponic gardens rise where assembly lines once stood. Others propose turning them into affordable housing, small businesses, or cultural venues. The dream of these buildings is simple to be useful again, but in ways that reflect the city's current needs rather than its industrial past. You can picture an old factory floor, lit not by sparks from welding, but by sunlight streaming through restored windows, rows of vegetables growing in soil beds, where engines once rolled out. Children might visit on school trips, learning about both the history of industry and the promise of sustainable food. The building does not forget what it was, but it finds a new voice. In Tunis, the Hotel du Lac shows how a single structure can embody the tension between preservation and change. Built in 1973 by the Italian architect Raffaele Contigiani, the hotel is a striking piece of brutalism shaped like an inverted pyramid. For years it was a symbol of modern Tunis, but in recent decades it fell into disuse. Its odd form, once celebrated, was now seen by some as outdated or ugly. Developers have eyed it for demolition, but architects and activists have argued for its preservation. Their vision is not to leave it as a dead monument, but to adapt it. They imagine the hotel reborn as a cultural center, with light-filled galleries, gardens on its terraces, and public spaces opening its once exclusive halls to the whole city. Picture walking into the lobby where once only paying guests were welcome, and finding an exhibition of local artists or a community meeting. The same concrete that was designed for luxury could now shelter public life. Its dream is not only to survive demolition, but to become part of a sustainable urban future, proving that even bold, difficult forms can be turned towards service and inclusion. Each of these examples shows a different path, but all share a single idea. A building does not have to end when its original purpose ends. It can dream of something else. The Électricité du Liban headquarters dreams of shifting from industry to creativity. Daharan International Airport dreams of turning travel into ecology. The factories of Detroit dream of rebirth as commons for art, food and housing. The Hotel du Lac dreams of surviving by serving its community in new ways. Transformation is not about ignoring history, it is about layering new meaning onto old forms. Renovation, in this sense, is not only a financial investment, it is a cultural and political act. Choosing to keep and adapt a building says that the past still matters, even as the future demands change. When we reuse rather than erase, we allow buildings to carry memory forward while adapting to present needs. We also reduce waste, save resources, and keep alive the textures of our cities. More than that, we respect the idea that architecture is not disposable. Every wall, every column, every roof already carries the work of human hands and the stories of human lives. To imagine them transformed is to imagine a city that values continuity as much as progress. Skyscrapers tell a story about ambition. When people look at them, they often see power, progress, and pride. They pierce the sky, rising far above the streets, and for a time each one tries to be the tallest, the strongest, the most admired. Yet behind this height is a fragile balance. Towers are expensive to build, costly to maintain, and vulnerable to changes in taste and technology. If we imagine what these buildings dream, their dreams are about holding on, staying relevant, and redefining their purpose as the world around them changes. The Empire State Building in New York is a clear example. Completed in 1931 during the Great Depression, it rose at a time when many people were out of work and the economy was collapsing. Yet the project went forward, giving jobs to thousands of workers. For 40 years it was the tallest building in the world. Its image became a symbol of New York, and more broadly, of American resilience. Even today, it anchors the skyline despite being surrounded by taller and newer towers. If the Empire State dreams, its dream is to remain steady in the face of change. It has done this by adapting. Once filled with offices, it has shifted toward tourism. Its observation decks welcome millions of visitors each year. The building has also been retrofitted with energy-efficient systems, reducing waste and lowering emissions. Imagine the spire at night, glowing not just as decoration, but as proof that a building nearly a century old can still find purpose. The dream is resilience to stand firm while others come and go. If the Empire State Building looks backward with pride, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai looks forward with ambition. Finished in 2010, it remains the tallest building in the world, at more than 828 meters. The tower dominates its city, visible from miles away in the desert. Its design echoes Islamic patterns, but its purpose is global visibility. It proclaims Dubai's role as a modern hub of commerce and luxury. Yet even as it shines, the Burj Khalifa seems to dream of being surpassed. Every tallest building in history has held the title for only a short while. Already new projects in Saudi Arabia and China plan to reach higher. In that sense, the Burj's dream is not only to stand as the tallest, but to inspire competition. It wants another tower to rise, to prove that ambition never stops. At the same time, the Burj may dream of redefining itself. In a world facing climate change, a tower built on such scale cannot only be a monument to wealth, it will need to prove it can also be sustainable. Imagine its glass skin fitted with panels that capture solar energy, or its systems recycling water in a desert where every drop matters. If the Burj Khalifa dreams, it dreams of a second life as not just a marvel of engineering, but also a model of responsibility. While some skyscrapers compete for height, others dream in quieter ways. The Tokyo Skytree, completed in 2012, is the tallest structure in Japan. Unlike an office tower, it is a communications hub, designed to send signals across the region. It carries television broadcasts, radio transmissions, and digital networks. To look at it is to see ambition in height, but to understand it is to see ambition in connection. Its dream is not to be admired only from the outside, but to be felt in the invisible threads of communication it carries. Picture a late-night call between family members, or a broadcast reaching millions of homes, all made possible by the signals pulsing through the tower. In this way, the Skytree dreams of being heard, not just seen. It stands as a reminder that even in a vast city of millions, connection is fragile and needs infrastructure to hold it together. The tower's dream is to keep those bonds alive, across distance and across time. The Shard in London tells another version of aspiration. Completed in 2012, its glass sides rise like a piece of crystal breaking into the sky. It is not the tallest in the world, but it is one of the most recognizable in Europe. Unlike older towers built mainly for business, the Shard was designed with mixed uses in mind: offices, restaurants, a hotel, and apartments. Its dream is not only height, but inclusivity. It wants to be a space where different forms of life overlap. Visitors can dine, workers can labor, and residents can live, all within the same vertical structure. Its transparency also matters. The glass skin allows light to flood the interior, while giving those inside wide views of the city. This openness contrasts with the closed feel of older towers. Imagine someone standing at the top, looking out over London, seeing the Thames curve and the older dome of St. Paul's Cathedral nearby. The Shard seems to dream of clarity, of making the city visible from new angles, and of letting people feel part of something larger rather than locked away in an office block. These towers remind us that aspiration carries both pride and fragility. The Empire State Building carries the pride of survival, yet it must adapt constantly to remain useful. The Burj Khalifa projects ambition beyond measure, yet it knows it will one day be outdone, and must find new relevance in sustainability. The Tokyo Skytree offers invisible strength, but it depends on networks that are themselves vulnerable to disruption. The Shard opens itself to light and community, but glass also makes it exposed and delicate. Each of these buildings tells us that height is not enough. Their dreams are not only to be tall, but to endure, to transform, and to mean something more than steel and glass. Buildings have always stood between people and the natural world. They provide shelter from rain, heat, and wind. They create a boundary that keeps the outside out and the inside safe. Yet this separation has also made us think of architecture as something apart from nature, even against it. In our time, that view has begun to shift. We now see that buildings must learn to work with the environment rather than fight it. The dream of nature and symbiosis is the idea that structures can blend into their surroundings, feed from natural systems, and even help restore what has been damaged. When we look at certain buildings, we can imagine them longing to return to this balance. Frank Lloyd Wright's Fallingwater in Pennsylvania is one of the clearest examples. Built in 1939, the house stretches over a waterfall, its terraces jutting out like stone ledges. From a distance, it almost looks as if it grew there on its own. Wright designed it to merge with its setting, using local stone and placing the sound of rushing water at the center of daily life. Inside, the floor is paved with rock from the site, polished but still rough in places. Windows open directly onto the trees, so that walls dissolve into forest. If Fallingwater dreams, its dream is to vanish into the landscape completely. It does not want to stand apart as a monument. It wants to be mistaken for part of the stream and the woods. Picture a visitor standing in the living room with the windows open, hearing the water below and smelling the damp air of moss and pine. The house seems to whisper that humans can live without cutting themselves off from the rhythms of nature. The dream is not domination but belonging. The Sydney Opera House tells a different story. Built in 1973, it rises above the harbour with its white shell-like roofs. From some angles it looks like sails, from others like seashells scattered on the shore. It's designed by Gernotson, drew from the forms of nature as much as from engineering. If it dreams of being an open shell for sound, a place where voices from around the world can echo and mix like the ocean tide. Imagine standing inside one of its concert halls while music rises and reverberates, the curved walls shaping the sound as if it were bouncing inside a giant shell. Outside, the building reflects light like water, changing through the day. The Opera House seems to long to remind us that culture is not separate from nature. Song, performance, and storytelling are like waves, part of a flow that crosses borders. Its dream is to be a seashell not only for Australia, but for all the world's voices, catching and amplifying them as the ocean amplifies sound across distance. In Sharjah, the Bank Street buildings offer another version of the dream. Built in the 1970s, these mid-rise blocks once served mainly commercial functions, with the simple forms of modernist design. Over time they became outdated, their concrete facades stained and their interiors less suited to new needs. Instead of tearing them down, architects have proposed turning them into sustainable spaces. Their dream is transformation into a green complex, with shaded courtyards, energy-efficient systems, and greenery climbing their surfaces. Imagine walking along the street and seeing the old concrete softened by vines and trees planted in terraces. Inside, cool air flows through redesigned systems that reduce energy use. Offices and shops remain, but now they coexist with gardens and public areas. The dream of these buildings is not to erase their past but to carry it forward in a way that aligns with today's ecological needs. They remind us that symbiosis does not require a fresh start. It can happen by reworking what we already have. The Sidi Ifni cable car system in Morocco offers a more unusual example. Built during the colonial era and abandoned by the 1970s, it was once used to transport goods between the town and the port. Today it stands as a rusting relic, its cables and towers silent against the coastal landscape, yet some imagine it could be reborn, not for cargo but for people and for ecology. Picture stepping into a restored cabin and gliding above the cliffs, seeing the coastline spread out below, the ocean stretching beyond. The cable car could become a viewpoint for visitors, a way to experience the natural beauty without damaging it. Along the route, small stations could serve as eco-hubs, teaching about the local landscape, its plants, and its wildlife. In this vision, the cable car dreams of reconnection. It no longer moves crates of goods, but instead reconnects people to land and sea, showing them what they might otherwise overlook. It shifts from a tool of extraction to a tool of awareness. These cases point toward a broader truth. Buildings, whether houses, cultural centers, offices, or infrastructure, can all carry dreams of working with nature rather than against it. Fallingwater longs to dissolve into its stream and forest. The Opera House longs to be a seashell amplifying voices. The Bank Street buildings long to be remade with plants and sustainable systems. The Sidi Ifni cable car longs to carry not goods but people into awareness of their environment. In each case, the dream is about survival, not only of the building itself but of the balance between humans and the ecosystems that support them. If we think of eco-architecture as humanity's survival instinct, these dreams become more than metaphors. They are guides. We already know that buildings consume energy, emit carbon, and alter landscapes. We also know that design can reduce harm, conserve resources, and even repair damage. The dreams of these buildings can remind us what is at stake. Imagine cities where towers are covered in gardens, where abandoned infrastructure becomes a way to see and protect nature, where even old blocks of concrete can support new forms of life. The buildings themselves cannot choose this path, but by imagining their dreams, we push ourselves toward it. They become teachers in stone and steel, urging us to remember that architecture is part of the same web as rivers, trees, and skies. Think about what it feels like to cross a bridge, share a courtyard, or step into a place made for many people at once. Your pace changes. You look up, then out, then toward others. Architecture can shape that shift. It guides us into shared paths and shared time. When a building or a piece of infrastructure works, it does more than move bodies from point A to B. It gives people a way to be with one another. The dream of connection and belonging lives inside these structures. It asks them to hold our weight and our worries, our errands and our rituals, our daily crossings and our rare returns. The Brooklyn Bridge carries this dream in steel and stone. Opened in 1883, it ties Manhattan to Brooklyn with a span that still feels generous. You enter the wooden deck and hear the rhythm of footsteps, wheels and wind. Cables rise and fan out like a web. The towers frame the sky. You share the lane with commuters, joggers, parents pushing strollers, and couples who walk slow to make the moment last. The bridge does more than link two boroughs. It holds lives together across a river that might have been a divide. It lets a nurse finish a night shift on one side and get home faster to the other. It lets a baker send fresh bread across town before dawn. It lets a teenager ride a bike to a weekend job. The bridge's structure, truss, deck, cable stays, stone abutments matters. But its social structure matters as much. It is a public right-of-way, a civic room in the open air. If the bridge dreams, it dreams of that steady flow. It wants to remain a place where strangers keep pace side by side and feel, if only for the span of a crossing, that they are part of one city. Now picture a housing block in Abu Dhabi, known as Shabiat. Built in the 1970s, these low-rise units used simple plans and shaded courtyards to house families fast, during a time of rapid growth. Over the years, some of these buildings fell out of step with new needs. Yet their bones hold promise: thick walls, cross-ventilation, shared outdoor space, ground-floor rooms that open to the street. Imagine an adaptive reuse that turns a cluster of Shabiat into small galleries and makers' spaces. A former living room becomes a room for printmaking. A kitchen turns into a workshop with sinks and storage. A courtyard hosts evening talks under string lights. The word for this is programming. You tune the spaces to new uses, but you keep the scale and the grain that make them friendly. Curators pair emerging artists with older residents to build shows about neighborhood history. School groups fill sketchbooks in quiet rooms where families once shared meals. The social logic of the original plan, neighbor meets neighbor across a threshold, still works. Now it carries culture as well as family life. The dream of reuse here is not glamour. It is access. It gives young artists a place to show work without gatekeepers. It gives local crafts a home. It gives a city a memory bank that stays open. Far from the Gulf, in the rose-red rock of Jordan, Petra waits in its canyon. You enter through the Sikh, a narrow cleft where walls rise and the light turns soft. At the end the treasury appears, cut from the cliff face with perfect control. Petra was a Nabatean city, once crossed by trade routes that moved incense, silk and ideas. Then it emptied. For a long time, sand and silence kept it safe. Today, crowds return. Guides call out. Cameras click. The stone bears both the thrill of discovery and the risk of wear. If Petra dreams, it dreams of resurrection, protection and silence in balance. It wants people to come back, but it also wants the right kind of care. You can design for that care. Boardwalks keep feet off fragile ground. Timed entry spreads the load through the day. Shaded rest points reduce heat stress. Trained conservators stabilize cracks without changing the face. Rangers guide visitors into side trails that reveal water channels and cisterns, the real infrastructure that made the city work. In that plan, Petra belongs to the world, and still belongs to itself. The dream is not to freeze time, but to let time move without tearing the place apart. Return to Abu Dhabi, and look up at the Buti Al Otaiba Tower, one of the city's early high-rises. Its facade includes mashrabiyah screens that filter light and protect privacy. The structure sits at a key corner where office life and street life meet. Picture its next life as a hybrid school and gallery. The lower floors host studios for street art, calligraphy, and digital media. The mid-levels offer classrooms for night courses in design, sound, and film. The top floors hold rotating exhibitions that pair local graffiti with archival images of the city's growth. The screens become part of the display, a canvas for projection mapping on festival nights, a filter that casts patterned light into seminar rooms during the day. A small library lines a double-height stair, open to anyone who climbs. A radio booth on a mezzanine streams student work. The tower keeps its load-bearing core and its envelope but shifts its use toward public culture. The dream is to fold art and education into daily urban life, not tuck them away. People pass through on their commute and end up staying for a workshop. Teenagers bring their parents to a show. A visiting artist swaps techniques with a mural crew. The building acts like a bridge, only vertical. These places raise a simple point. Architecture can serve as infrastructure for belonging. A bridge can be more than a route. A housing block can be more than shelter. A ruin can be more than a backdrop. A tower can be more than rentable area. In each case, design choices turn into social choices. You choose a clear span so people can gather without obstacles. You choose a shaded arcade so a parent can wait while a child finishes class. You choose wayfinding that makes a visitor feel welcome without asking for help. You add benches, water, light and sight lines. You lay power and data where people can plug in. You draw a section that shows airflow, not just finishes. These are technical steps, but they are also acts of care. Think of a day in the life of each place. At dawn on the Brooklyn Bridge, a delivery rider moves across the deck and nods to a runner passing the other way. After school, a friend group meets at a shabby art gallery opening and sees a photo series from a neighbor who has lived on the block since childhood. Midday at Petra, a small group stands quiet as a guide, points to channels carved in stone, showing how people once caught rare rain. At dusk in the Buti Alo Tabor Tower, a class learns how to stretch a canvas while a sound engineer records a podcast upstairs. None of this needs grand language. It needs ways in, places to pause, and chances to look each other in the eye. Belonging is not a slogan you hang on a wall. It is something you build into plans and sections, into sight lines and shade, into rules and maintenance. It is a handrail at the right height, a ramp with the right slope, a door that opens wide without effort. It is a courtyard that stays lit and watched, so elders feel safe to sit at night. It is a water fountain that does not break. It is programming that rotates and listens. It is a lease that reserves room for community use. When a bridge, a house, a ruin, or a tower holds these choices, it can hold people better. It can hold their meetings, their conflicts, their celebrations, and their quiet. In that work, architecture earns its place as a frame for connection, a spine for shared life, a host for the many versions of us who must find ways to live together. Architecture is not neutral. Buildings and streets carry the marks of who built them, for what purpose, and under what power. In colonial settings, architecture became an instrument of control. It imposed new ways of living and new ways of moving, sometimes erasing older ones. In Algiers and Tunis, French colonial planners laid grids of boulevards that cut through the dense, winding fabric of the traditional Medina. These wide streets were not only about transport, they gave troops easy routes to march and clear sightlines for surveillance. They created districts where Europeans could live in comfort, separate from the native population. The architecture of the period told the story of domination. Apartment blocks with balconies faced wide squares, while the old Casbahs were left to decline. If the colonial city dreamed, it dreamed not of harmony but of order, of keeping one group in view and another out of sight. The very stones enforced separation. Imagine walking from a shaded alley of the old quarter into a sunlit boulevard lined with arcades and cafes, the shift signaling not just a change in style but in power. The legacy of this design still shapes these cities. The boulevards remain, the blocks remain, and the contrasts remain. People live their lives across these lines, but the architecture carries the history of how those lines were drawn. To reclaim such spaces means to reimagine their purpose. In Tunis, artists have staged performances in the old Hotel du Lac, a brutalist hotel from the 1970s that stands in the colonial grid. Their work reframes a structure often dismissed as ugly and ties it back to the city's complex story of modernity and independence. In Algiers, preservation groups push to protect parts of the Casbahs, not as a relic but as a living neighborhood. The act of walking those streets today is a form of resistance against the erasure that colonial planning once intended. Across the Swana region from North Africa to West Asia, modernist buildings put up in the decades after independence also carry weight. Some were designed by local architects, others by Europeans or Americans, often imported with little adaptation. Their forms were clean, their materials concrete and steel, their promise tied to a global idea of progress. Yet half a century later, many of them stand neglected. The reasons vary: economic strain, political conflict, shifting tastes. Still, these structures hold potential. For young architects in the region, they are not just decaying shells, they are raw material for new dreams. To redream modernism is to treat it as both heritage and challenge. You recognize its historical importance while refusing to see it as finished. Consider a modernist airport in Saudi Arabia, once a symbol of mobility, later left behind by new infrastructure. To some, it is obsolete. To others, it could become a center for ecological research and education. By inserting new systems into old frameworks, a concrete terminal can serve a new generation without losing its identity. The same logic applies to offices in Beirut, government towers in Cairo, or housing blocks in Baghdad. Each one offers a chance to ask, how can this building live again without repeating the mistakes of its past? For students of architecture, these questions are not abstract. They are assignments, competitions, and studio projects that ask them to test solutions in real contexts. In Sharjah, at the American University, students were given the task of reimagining modernist buildings from the region. Their approach was not to design glossy replacements, but to work with what already stood. One group looked at the Bank Street buildings, modest concrete blocks from the 1970s. Instead of clearing them, they proposed a sustainable retrofit, shaded balconies, planted facades, and new circulation that opened the buildings to the street. Another group rethought an abandoned cable car system in Morocco. They imagined it not as failed infrastructure, but as a potential ecotourism network, reconnecting people with the coastal landscape. A third group proposed transforming the brutalist headquarters of Électricité du Liban into a cultural hub, turning its heavy walls into canvases for light and sound. These projects show how young architects see buildings not as finished objects but as living frameworks. They bring their own cultural perspectives to the work, informed by Palestinian, Sudanese, Egyptian, Iraqi, Pakistani, Saudi, and Syrian backgrounds. The result is not a single style but a collection of reclaims. To understand why this matters, picture a student standing in front of a neglected tower, sketchbook in hand. They see cracks in the concrete, rust on the railings, dust on the floors. But instead of imagining demolition, they imagine children's drawings covering the walls, solar panels on the roof, small shops in the lobby, or a library on the mezzanine. Their drawing reframes the building as a resource, not a burden. This act of imagining is itself a form of resistance. It pushes back against the global habit of equating new with better. It insists that the built environment of the region is worth reworking, worth keeping, and worth passing on. The work of reclaiming these structures also opens space for reconciliation. Colonial grids and modernist blocks were both imposed in different ways, one through foreign power, the other through imported ideals of progress. In each case, local communities had to adapt, sometimes at the cost of older traditions. To redream these buildings now is to fold those layers together rather than pretend they never existed. A boulevard in Algiers can host a protest march as well as a parade. A brutalist hotel in Tunis can host a festival rather than stand as a monument to exclusivity. A tower in Beirut can carry art instead of bureaucracy. Each shift changes not only the use but also the meaning. Architecture as control is visible in the straight lines of colonial planning and the heavy slabs of imported modernism. Architecture as resistance is visible in the way people reuse, reinterpret, and refuse to let these buildings die. The dreams of these buildings are not about returning to some imagined past or clinging to foreign ideals. They are about finding balance. They ask to be seen not only for what they were built to do, but for what they can still become. Reclamation is a design strategy. It is also a cultural practice. It says that history is layered, not erased. It says that people have the power to rewrite the story of the walls around them. When we speak about the future of architecture, we often picture shiny towers, digital simulations, and images that look more like science fiction than reality. Yet the future is not just about making shapes that look new. It is about finding ways for buildings to serve people and the planet in conditions that are changing fast. Climate shifts, rapid urban growth, and new technologies all press on design choices. If buildings dream of the future, their dreams are bound up with how we balance invention with survival, imagination with the realities of daily life. One path into this future can be seen in experiments with artificial intelligence. In Abu Dhabi, students and architects have begun using AI to reinterpret the shabby housing blocks built in the 1970s. These homes, simple and functional, once served the urgent demand for housing in a rapidly expanding city. Many are now worn, with layouts that feel outdated. Rather than clearing them, Designers are using AI tools to generate possible reuses. You feed the program plans and photographs, and it suggests ways the buildings could be adapted. The outputs are not ready-made solutions, but they open space for imagination. Some images show the blocks covered in greenery, others transform courtyards into small theaters or markets. The dream here is not just technical, it is social. The Shabbyat homes want to live again, to house not only families but culture, art, and community activity. AI acts as a partner in this dreaming, helping designers see what they might not have pictured. Yet the human role remains. You still need to decide what is useful, what is affordable, and what honors the community that lives there. In this balance, the building's future becomes a mix of machine speculation and human judgment. Another path is the net zero skyscraper. For decades, towers have been judged by their height and their form. Now they are judged by their performance. A net zero building is one that produces as much energy as it uses, often through renewable systems like solar panels, wind turbines, and advanced insulation. Picture a high-rise in a dense city. Its skin is no longer just glass. It is a field of photovoltaic panels angled to catch sun from dawn to dusk. Its mechanical systems capture waste heat from elevators and computers and feed it back into the heating cycle. Its plumbing filters grey water and recycles it for cooling and irrigation. On windy days, small turbines built into the crown spin quietly, adding power to the grid. These systems make the tower look almost alive, adjusting to weather and use. The dream of such a skyscraper is not only to reach high, but to tread lightly. It wants to prove that even the largest and most resource-hungry type of building can adapt to the limits of our planet. Yet the challenge is real, costs remain high, regulations are uneven, and not every site has the same climate or resources. The dream is powerful, but its fulfillment depends on policy, economics and maintenance as much as on design. In Milan, the Bosco Verticale, or vertical forest, shows another version of this future. Completed in 2014, it is a pair of residential towers covered with trees, shrubs and plants. From a distance it looks like two cliffs draped in green. Up close, each balcony carries its own patch of landscape, with soil and irrigation built into the structure. The idea was simple. Instead of planting a park on the ground, lift the park into the sky. The buildings absorb carbon dioxide, filter dust, and provide shade. Birds nest in the branches, insects move between levels, and residents live with greenery just outside their windows. The vertical forest dreams of bringing nature back into the city without waiting for large open spaces that may never be available. It says that architecture can become habitat, not just container. At the same time, it reveals the difficulties. Maintenance is constant. Gardeners use ropes to scale the towers and tend to the plants. Costs are higher than in a conventional building. The model works in Milan, but may not translate directly to cities with different climates. Still, the image has power. Other cities have begun to copy it, testing vertical gardens in Asia and the Middle East. The building's dream becomes contagious, spreading to other skylines. These examples raise the question of balance. Technology can help us imagine and even build futures that once seemed impossible. AI can give us hundreds of scenarios for reuse. Engineers can create systems that let towers produce their own energy. Architects can design structures that hold forests hundreds of feet above ground. Yet none of these dreams matter if they ignore the people who will live in or around them. A net zero tower that only the wealthy can afford is a limited success. A vertical forest that costs too much to maintain risks becoming a novelty rather than a model. An AI-generated vision that forgets the cultural and social context may produce an image, but not a real home. The work is to match the scale of imagination with the scale of need. Think of a day-to-day scene. A family in Abu Dhabi might move into a reworked Shabbyat block where the courtyard is now shaded and cool, where children play under murals designed by local artists. The same block has solar panels on the roof, reducing the cost of electricity for the tenants. In a different city, an office worker might step into a skyscraper whose elevators are powered by the building's own renewable systems. The lobby feels bright, not only from design, but because the building's efficiency reduces energy waste and heat buildup. In Milan, a resident of the vertical forest might water plants on a balcony, sharing space with sparrows and butterflies. These are not futuristic fantasies. They are ways the future dream becomes part of ordinary life. The future dreams of architecture are not only about spectacle, they are about survival. As cities continue to grow and the planet warms, buildings will need to consume less, give back more, and work with the ecosystems they inhabit. The dreams of AI-driven reuse, net zero performance, and vertical forests are not the end but the beginning of this shift. They remind us that imagination is not optional, it is the first step in adapting. The task is to keep that imagination tied to social realities, to the people who use the buildings and the cities that host them. Without that, the dream risks turning into an empty image. With it, the dream becomes a path forward that is not only possible, but necessary. When we think of buildings, we often picture them as silent and still, yet some buildings act more like storytellers. They speak through their form, their presence, and the way people use them. They do not simply house activity, they stage it. They give shape to culture, and allow it to unfold in public. In this sense, architecture can be seen as performance. A building becomes a dream, not because of its materials, but because of the way it carries stories, sometimes for centuries, sometimes in a single instant of recognition. The Sydney Opera House is one of the clearest examples of this. Designed by John Hewson and completed in 1973, it has become a symbol of openness, of a culture that faces the world. Its soaring white shells suggest sails, a reminder of Sydney's harbour and its history as a maritime city. But the dream of the Opera House goes beyond its form. It is a stage for voices from around the globe. Opera, theatre, dance, and contemporary music all take place within its halls. The building makes a statement that culture does not belong to one nation alone, but is shared across borders. Its dream is one of openness, of creating a place where global stories meet. Imagine walking across the forecourt on a summer evening. You hear the sound of rehearsals inside while outside crowds gather. Children run, tourists take photos, and locals pause after work. The building is performing even before you enter it. It has turned the edge of the harbour into a cultural square, open to anyone who wishes to experience it. Its success lies not only in its striking shape, but in the way it has become part of Sydney's identity as a global city. In Paris, the Pompidou Centre presents a different dream. When it opened in 1977, designed by Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers, it shocked many Parisians. Its structure, ducts and mechanical systems were placed on the outside, painted in bright colors. It was an inversion of architectural tradition. Instead of hiding the machinery of the building, it exposed it. Many saw it as ugly, even rebellious. Yet that was the point. The Pompidou Centre dreamed of openness, of stripping away pretense, of saying that art should not be locked behind closed doors. The building's large plaza quickly became a gathering space for performers, activists, and ordinary people. Street musicians played there, jugglers entertained children, and demonstrators gathered. The dream was not only inside, where modern art filled the galleries. It was also outside, in the public life the building generated. This openness reflected a cultural mood of rebellion, of questioning authority, of wanting to make creativity visible. Imagine approaching the centre for the first time. You see escalators in glass tubes climbing the facade. You see pipes painted in blue, green, and red. It looks more like a factory than a museum. Yet once you enter, you realize it works as both. It produces culture, not goods. It opens the process of making and showing art. The Pompidou Centre turned architecture into a kind of cultural manifesto, a dream of freedom expressed in steel and glass. Barcelona's Sagrada Família carries a dream of a different kind. Designed by Antoni Gaudí and begun in 1882, it remains unfinished. Cranes still tower over its spires, and construction continues more than a century later. Its form is unlike any other. Towers rise like stone trees, facades teem with sculptures, and light filters through stained glass in colors that shift through the day. The dream of the Sagrada Família is one of patience, of eternal unfolding. It is a reminder that not all cultural expression happens quickly. Some dreams stretch across generations. The people who first laid its stones knew they would never see it completed. Yet they worked with the faith that others would continue. This passing of responsibility from one generation to the next becomes part of the building's story. To walk through the basilica is to feel both awe and humility. You stand inside a forest of columns, each branching into smaller ribs, as if the structure itself were alive. You sense the dream of a building that is never static, always in progress. The unfinished state does not weaken its meaning. Instead, it deepens it. The Sagrada Família performs a story of time, of patience, and of cultural endurance. These three cases show how architecture can act as cultural expression in very different ways. The Sydney Opera House tells a story of openness and global connection. The Pompidou Centre embodies rebellion and transparency. The Sagrada Família speaks of patience and unfolding over centuries. In each, the building does more than provide shelter. It performs. It creates a stage on which society can see itself. One can imagine other scenarios that help explain this. Think of a child attending her first concert at the Opera House, sitting beneath the sweeping ceiling, realizing that voices and instruments can fill a space so completely. The building itself becomes part of her memory of music. Or picture a group of artists sketching outside the Pompidou Centre, surrounded by street performers, feeling part of a cultural current that values openness and risk. Or think of a visitor to the Sagrada Família, standing quietly as colored light shifts around him, aware that he is only one in a long line of people who have experienced the same space across generations. In each case, the building is not just background, it is part of the event. This view of architecture as cultural performance also raises questions. What does it mean when a building becomes a symbol? Can it live up to its dream? The Opera House faced years of controversy during its construction, with costs soaring and Unson forced to resign. The Pompidou Centre was mocked as a monster before it gained acceptance. The Sagrada Família has been criticized for moving away from Gaudi's original vision. Yet these struggles also become part of the story. They show that cultural expression is never simple. It involves conflict, debate, and compromise. The building's dream does not erase these tensions, it contains them, allowing them to become part of the performance. In this way, architecture as cultural expression is always unfinished. A building may be completed in stone or steel, but its meaning continues to evolve. The Opera House still welcomes new voices. The Pompidou Centre still provokes debate. The Sagrada Família still rises, unfinished but alive. Their dreams are not locked in the past. They unfold with each new use, each new visitor, each new act of performance. The cultural dream is less about completion and more about ongoing expression, about giving form to human stories that never truly end. Dreaming in architecture is not only about the future, it also means listening to what has already been said in stone, wood, and glass. When people look at old buildings, they often feel a pull toward memory. The cracked walls of an abandoned church, the worn steps of a city hall, the faded paint of a family home, all of these carry echoes of those who lived before. A building holds silence, yet it tells a story. The dream in this case is not about invention, but about recognition. We dream through buildings because they remind us of time, of continuity, of being part of something larger. They whisper that others have walked here, stood here, imagined here. Think of an ancient amphitheater in ruins. We may not hear the voices that once filled the air, but when we stand in the space, we imagine them. We picture the shouts of a crowd, the rhythm of performance, the gathering of a community. The stones do not speak directly, yet they allow us to dream a past we never saw. That is the poetic quality of architecture. It makes memory present, not by preserving it perfectly, but by carrying its traces. Even a modest structure like an old barn in the countryside works this way. The wood beams darkened by smoke, the iron nails rusted, the smell of earth beneath. It holds the history of work, of seasons passing, of human persistence. The dream is not grand, but it is still there, connecting us to those who labored before. Dreams also lean toward the future. Architecture has always been a way to imagine what does not yet exist. When people design buildings, they project lives, activities, and communities that may come. In this sense, a building is anticipation made solid. Consider a city that chooses to build a library in a neighborhood that has none. The library stands not only as a structure of books and desks, but also as a dream of learning, of children discovering stories, of adults finding resources, of strangers gathering in common purpose. The building calls forth a future that may or may not come to pass, but it holds the possibility. Even when a project remains on paper, the sketches and models embody the dream of what could be. One can see this in the current push for net zero buildings. They anticipate a future where construction does not harm the environment but works in balance with it. The dream is not only technical but moral. It is a way of saying that buildings must belong to a larger story of human survival. A net zero tower in a city skyline does not simply rise higher than its neighbors. It speaks of a different ambition to endure without destroying. To imagine such a tower is to dream of another kind of life, one where progress does not consume the world but sustains it. The poetry of this dream lies in its hope, in its insistence that a building can model a future way of living. Dreams also converse with nature. Some buildings try to resist nature, to shut it out with walls and systems, yet many of the most powerful dreams in architecture come from aligning with the environment rather than fighting it. A house built beside a river that reflects the water in its glass, a courtyard that frames the sky as part of the design, a mosque whose open arcades let breezes move through. The dream in each case is of harmony. Architecture in this sense is not only human invention, but a companion to the landscape. Take the example of Fallingwater in Pennsylvania. Built by Frank Lloyd Wright in the 1930s, it does not perch above the forest as a separate object but grows into it. The house stands above a waterfall, with balconies that stretch like stone ledges. Inside, the sound of the water is constant. The dream here is to dissolve into the woods, to live not apart from nature, but within it. To visit the house is to feel that architecture can be both human and natural at once, each shaping the other. This dream of dissolving has guided countless later projects that aim not for dominance but for dialogue with their setting. In other parts of the world, architects turn to the desert, where stone, sand and wind define the environment. Buildings there often take on thick walls, shaded courtyards, and wind towers. These are not just technical responses, they are poetic conversations. They speak to the harshness of the sun, the scarcity of water, and the need for community spaces that protect without isolating. A shaded courtyard becomes more than a cool refuge. It becomes a dream of gathering in safety, of human bonds strengthened in the face of the desert's demands. Buildings can also be silent companions. Many people feel attachment to structures not because of their grandeur, but because of their quiet presence in daily life. A neighborhood cafe, a local school, a modest apartment block, these may not appear in architectural journals, but they carry dreams of belonging. They shape the rhythms of life, offering places where people meet, learn or rest. In this sense, architecture does not need to be monumental to hold poetic meaning. It needs only to be faithful to human life. Imagine returning to your childhood school after many years. The hallways seem smaller, the paint may be different, but the space still carries the echo of your younger self. The classrooms recall lessons, friendships and even fears. The building has been a companion, holding those memories even as you moved on. Or think of a small apartment where a family has lived for decades. The walls marked with children's growth charts, the kitchen worn by years of cooking, the balcony filled with plants. None of this is dramatic, but all of it is deeply poetic. The building has shared life, quietly, without asking for attention. It has been a constant partner in the unfolding of a family's story. To call architecture poetic is not to make it mystical, it is to recognize that buildings carry meanings beyond function. They are stages for memory, symbols of future hopes, conversations with the natural world, and companions to daily life. The dream in architecture lies in these layers. A wall is never just a wall, it separates and protects, but it also records the touch of hands, the passage of time, the marks of weather. A roof is never only a cover, it frames the sky, catches the rain, and shapes the sound of storms. A door is not only an entrance, it marks the threshold between private and public, between safety and exposure, between one world and another. When we walk through cities or landscapes, we encounter these dreams constantly, often without noticing. The bridge that holds together two parts of a town, the shrine that marks a sacred spot, the tower that signals ambition, the ruin that recalls loss, all are part of the poetics of architecture. They remind us that to dream in architecture is to live with echoes, to imagine futures, to speak with nature, and to find in buildings not only shelter, but companionship. When we stand before a building, whether it is a hut, a cathedral, or a tower of glass, we feel the weight of more than stone. What buildings dream about is what we dream about. They hold our fears, our desires, and our struggles in solid form. When we build, we are not just making walls and roofs. We are shaping memory, projecting hope, and giving form to the things that we cannot always say out loud. Buildings are our collective unconscious given shape, and in their silence they carry what we hold most deeply. The theme of survival comes first. Long before glass facades and steel frames, people sought only to endure. A cave was not simply a void in stone, but a dream of safety from rain and predators. A hut of mud and reed was not only material arranged to cover bodies, but a dream that life could continue another day. Even today, refugee camps with tents lined across barren land echo this primal dream. Each tent stands fragile, but together they form a declaration: we will live. The building, however slight, becomes survival materialized. In the grandest skyscraper, and in the smallest shack, the impulse is the same. Architecture insists on life. Reinvention is another dream that buildings carry. Cities never stay fixed. A market becomes a museum, a fort becomes a university, an abandoned factory becomes a set of loft apartments. In each act of reuse, a building dreams of a second life. This is not only practical, but poetic. Reinvention shows that architecture bends with human need, that stone and steel can take on new meanings as generations pass. Imagine walking into an old warehouse once filled with machines, now turned into a library. The smell of paper replaces the sound of industry, and the walls absorb new rhythms. The building does not forget its past, but it learns to speak again in a different voice. The dream of belonging also runs deep. No one wants to live without place. Villages, cities, and neighborhoods are ways to answer the human need to gather. A bridge connects not only two sides of a river, but two groups of lives. A public square is not just open ground, but a stage for protest, celebration, and mourning. Housing is not only shelter, but the framework of identity. In every one of these, the dream is of belonging to something larger, of not being alone. When people decorate their balconies, when they plant trees in a shared courtyard, when they gather at a street cafe, they are making the dream of belonging tangible. The building becomes an anchor for community. Forgiveness also appears in architecture. Colonial legacies, forced demolitions, and destructive planning have left wounds. Yet buildings also hold the dream of healing. When neglected structures are restored by students, when ruined quarters are opened for new uses, when architects return to forgotten neighborhoods, they practice forgiveness through design. A scar does not disappear, but it becomes part of the story. Consider the preservation of old quarters in cities once scarred by war, rather than erase the marks. The restorations allow them to remain visible, while new life moves among them. The building learns to live again without denying what happened. Forgiveness in this sense is not about forgetting, but about coexisting with loss. Love too flows through architecture. People rarely speak of it this way, but affection for place is one of the strongest human emotions. A child loves the smell of her grandmother's kitchen. A couple loves the bench where they first sat together. A community loves the hall where they celebrate weddings and mourn the dead. These attachments are not abstract. They are felt in walls, doors, windows, and floors. Love in architecture is not decoration. It is the quiet bond between human life and material form. A home built with care, even if modest, expresses love. A school painted each year by its students carries affection. A shrine maintained with flowers, even if crumbling, shows devotion. In all these, architecture becomes the vessel of human tenderness. To think of buildings as dreamers is to see them not as mute objects but as companions. A skyscraper rising into the sky is not only an engineering feat, it is ambition made visible. A mosque or church is not only a gathering hall, it is reverence given shape. A ruined fortress on a hill is not only stone eroded by time, it is memory refusing to fade. These structures dream through us because we give them meaning, and we dream through them because they hold those meanings longer than we can. Architecture is humanity's unconscious solidified. It carries what we cannot always keep in words. A city at night, with its mix of neon signs, old bridges and silent parks, is a living collage of dreams of survival, of reinvention, of belonging, of forgiveness, of love. Buildings dream because we place our inner lives in them, knowingly or not. And in turn, when we walk among them, we dream with them. We imagine futures they suggest, remember pasts they protect, and feel emotions they quietly embody. To dream with buildings is to recognize that we are not alone in shaping our world. The stone, the glass, and the steel carry our longings forward. A wall is never only a wall, and a roof never only a cover. They are parts of an ongoing dialogue between what we fear, what we hope, and what we love. The act of building is the act of dreaming, made heavy and solid, yet still open to change. In this sense, buildings do not stop dreaming, even when they fall silent. They carry the traces of our humanity, waiting for us to notice, to remember, and to dream again with them.